So good morning, everybody. I'm Joyce Graff. I'm one of the teachers at the Brookline Senior Center, and I have with me Claire Weston, one of my wonderful students. Hi, good morning, Claire.
Morning, Joyce.
Good morning, yeah. So today we're going to talk about making a quilted jacket. I taught you about stitch and flip last time, and we've talked about paper piecing, and these are lead-ups to the kind of thing that you can do with those techniques. And one of the interesting things you can do with them is to make a jacket out of an old sweatshirt. So that's what we're going to talk about today and see what you think. So if I wanted to build a sweatshirt jacket, let me see if I can get it. There's full screen. Okay, and you can see this is a picture that I took off the internet of a very interesting sweatshirt jacket, and you can see it's just pieced with little bits of stuff. And so in order to get them on, there are many techniques that we could use, one of which is stitch and flip. So here is a finished jacket. This is another sample. And you can see this woman has just put different patches together. She's actually put them together with machine sewing. So here I can see that she's zigzagged this one into place. Really, there's no wrong method for doing it. It's just whatever effect you want to create. Here's another one. And we've taken just pieces of different fabrics and put them together. She's got stripes in between the black to frame it, make it look a little bit like stained glass. Here's another one, just sort of random pieces. So you can create whatever effect you want to do. And that's the creative part of quilting. You just assemble bits and pieces of fabric and make it look wonderful.
I like the pink one.
Yes, I think that's my favorite too. And this is actually one of the easiest ones to make, and I'll show you a little bit more how to make that.
It's not so confusing.
Right. So we've talked a lot about paper piecing and foundation piecing. And in order to do foundation piecing, the way that it's different is that it's the same technique, but instead of having paper underneath, you have a piece of fabric underneath, which is going to stay there. So you start with a piece of cloth, the size and shape that you want it to be. In this case, they took regular squares, and you fill that space with patches of cloth, and you just stick stuff on it to please you. It could be leftover patches, anything you want, and just put it together with regular paper piecing kind of technique. So you'd start in the middle and you work your way out and so forth. But what if the foundation pieces were in fact pieces of pattern, like you were going to cut out to make a dress? So you can cut out whatever pattern you want and then fill that space with quilting, with different patches and leftover pieces. And one of the interesting ways you can get those pieces is to take an old sweatshirt. So if you start with a sweatshirt that's one size too big, because it's going to get a little smaller as you work, and you cut it apart, and now each one of these pieces becomes a space you can fill with quilting. So here's the back, here's the sleeve, and here's one of the fronts, okay? So use each one of these as a sort of foundation piece, and it becomes the lining of the jacket as well. So it's an easy way to make the right shape and fill it up. There are lots of different sweatshirt jackets on the market, and they all have little interesting challenges around the closures, the way they put the bottom together, the ribbing on the sleeves, the different collars. Some of them have hoods. Most of the sweatshirt jackets that I was able to see on the internet have hoods. So there's a hood here, there's a hood here, and that's going to complicate what we want to do. And here, this one has zippers, which would also be challenging to work with in quilting. So the simplest thing to do is just start with an old pullover sweatshirt and just fold it in half and cut the front down the middle to open it up to make a jacket. And you can use a used one. You could even get one at the thrift shop or something. And it's best if you wash it before you do it. Even if it's a new one, you should pre-wash it to make sure it's not going to shrink after you've done your quilting. So here we have it all in pieces. We've turned it inside out. You take the ribbing off, the cuffs and the bottom. You take the ribbing off, but do not remove the ribbing from the neck. And the reason you do that is to help it hold its shape while you're working with it, because it's biased, so it'll stretch, and we don't want it to stretch. So now we have the pieces. These are the two fronts, and what you see in the picture is that she's putting different pieces together. In this case, she wanted it to look like a Christmas quilt that she had made. She had some leftover bits. You can see this is from the border. This is from that center piece. And she wanted it to look like this quilt. So that's why she's using those pieces. And you just fill up your space. Doesn't matter if it's too big, because we can always trim it later, but you know what the shape of the piece is going to be because of we started from the sweatshirt. And these were done with a stitch and flip. So here we have a row that she's put together of patches. And now we're just going to sew the seam right through the sweatshirt. And then you flip that piece over and add the next piece, the next row here, and the next row, and the next row. So you just work like that across. And as you make each one of these seams, you're essentially quilting it, because you're holding together the quilted front that you're making plus the sweatshirt in the back, and you just stitch right through it and you're quilting. And the same technique was used on this one. You put one stripe, then the next stripe, then the next stripe, and the next stripe, and you just keep going. This is a pocket that she put on top at the end. So now that you've got the quilted pieces, you want to try it and make sure you like the way the design is coming together. She put hers onto a dress form, or you could try it on yourself and just see if, you know, the left and right coming together, does that look good to you? The way the sleeves are hanging, does that look good to you? She's just pinned it to her dress form to try it out, because now is the easiest time to change it before we start trimming the pieces and assembling it. And then you do any machine quilting that you want to do. Here you can see that she's done lines in this direction and then lines in the opposite direction, just to help it all hold together better. But if we've done stitch and flip here, as I mentioned, we already have some lines that are holding it together. And here we've already got the lines that we used to assemble our strips. So now we've got it the way we want it. We want to trim the pieces, and here what she's doing is trimming off that ribbing from the neckline. So we're going to trim that back and make sure that all the pieces are now the right size before we put it away. We'll trim it back to the size of the sweatshirt pieces. And now we get to reassemble it. So the first thing to do is put the shoulder seams together. And next you do the set-in sleeve here. And last of all, we're going to fold this sleeve in half and sew these seams to put the sides together. And again, you want to try it on, because if you need to make any adjustments, you can make some adjustments at this point much more easily before we bind it. Make sure that the sleeves are the right length and that it hangs the way you want it to on your hips. And now you make 2-inch bias strips. This shows one, but we'll need 2 inches to do this particular kind of bias binding. And we're going to bind it all the way around those raw edges. And there we are. So you can do quite a lot just with dressing up a sweatshirt. This is some other ideas for dressing up sweatshirts. Nancy Zeman has a blog where she has done very cute designs. These are children's designs, but she has a whole book on how to dress up a sweatshirt. So you can recycle a sweatshirt and do interesting things with it.